Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm doing a series check-in, so I'm letting you know the series that I am in the middle of, series that are currently open, and those which I've completed recently as well. So you can see how many series I have that I am still working my way through and are currently to be read. So the last one of these I did was about 6 months ago. It was at the end of August. For clarity, any series I consider open is a series that I still have books to read in them that are currently released. So if I'm talking about a series that hasn't finished being written yet, I will class that as open as long as I still have books to read that have been published. If, however, I am caught up, then that is not classed as an open series for me because I am hoping that I will read the next one of those when it comes out. Obviously, any finished series that I have not completed the books of, also an open series. So let's jump in with the series that I had on the last video where I did this series check-in and seeing how I have progressed with those. And firstly, we're going to start with the ones where I haven't progressed at all. So the series that are open that I want to read more books from, but I haven't actually done so in the last 6 months. And the first one of those we're going to talk about is Discworld, and specifically the City Watch. So just before my last check-in, I had read Guards. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it much more than I had the 2 books I'd read in the Death sub-series. So therefore I wanted to continue reading the City Watch. It hasn't happened, not yet at least. So Guards, the City Watch sub-series of Discworld is still on this list as opened, no change there yet. Other series included in this unchanged category are the Cradle series by Will White. Just before that video, I had read Unsold, the first book in the Cradle series. I have not continued on with that yet, although I did enjoy Unsold quite a lot. As well as that, there is the Lady Astronaut series by Mary Robinette Kowal. I've read the first 2 books of that. I still haven't continued with the 3rd book, Relentless Moon, yet, but I do again want to get to that sometime soon. And finally, in the unchanged category is Warlock Holmes, which is a very funny, light-hearted take on a Sherlock Holmes story by G.S. Denning, where Sherlock is actually a warlock. Very entertaining. The books I've read so far have tended to have a longer story and then a bunch of short stories to go along with it. I've really enjoyed them, but again, I am only 2 books into this 5-book series. I have not read any more since that last video. Next up, we're going to move on to series where I have progressed from the last time I checked in with you on my open series. And the first of these is going to be by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It is The Shadows of the Apt. When I spoke to you last about my series check-in, I had just finished book 1, Empire in Black and Gold, which was a good read for me. I was reading The Shadows of the Apt as part of a read-along on Alan's channel over at the Library of Alexandria. So I did read the next 3 books in the consecutive months following that. We did the first 4 books as part of that read along. I really enjoyed it, so just finished Salute the Dark as the last one of those 4, and I did enjoy the series quite a lot. For me, it didn't stand up to Tchaikovsky's other works. I think I much prefer the Dogs of War series, I much prefer the Children of Time series, I much prefer Guns of the Dawn, but I am enjoying it and I will get back to it at some point, I am sure. And the last 2 series from that last video that I want to talk about, and these are 2 that I have completed in the time since that video went out. The first one of these was The Memoirs of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. When I spoke to you last on this check-in, I had only just read The Natural History of Dragons book 1. I absolutely blitzed this across the end of 2021. I really enjoyed books 2, 3, 4 and 5, far more than I enjoyed book 1. Tropic of Serpents book 2 was a big step up for me, and then Voyage of the Basilisk book 3 was the real point where I decided I loved this series, and it continued to improve from there. It is a series I absolutely adore. I am actually looking to read the follow-up novel that isn't really part of the series. It's sort of a related follow-on book that I do want to read. It is actually on my TBR for this month if I do manage to get to it, but massively enjoyed that series as a whole. Definitely a recommend from me. I do have a should you read video for The Memoirs of Lady Trent, so you can go and check that out in the doobly-doo down below if you want to see more of my thoughts on that series. And then the last series that's a hangover from that previous video is another Tchaikovsky series. This one is the Children of Time series. I had read Children of Time at the beginning of 2021 and I absolutely loved it, and I had been delaying reading Children of Ruin, which is the 2nd book in the series. I should not have delayed. I finished that book and I loved it just as much as I love Children of Time. It was a very solid sci-fi read. Big fan of this series so far. Again, there's a video review of that down below in the doobly-doo if you want to check that out. But definitely a great series that I am up to date with. Hopefully there's another book coming out in this. Adrian Tchaikovsky has hinted at Children of Memory being the 3rd book in this series that may well be coming out at some point, and I'm super excited for when that happens, if that happens. So there you go, those are the series that have been hanging over from that previous video. I've completed a couple, I've progressed with one, but there are quite a few that I haven't done anything different with so far, and I should really get to soon. But also there are a lot of new series that I have opened up in this past 6 months. There are a lot of series that I've started, there are some that I have finished, but a lot that I've started, and many that I need to complete because this open series list is getting longer and longer by the minute, and it's going to become unmanageable if I keep going at this rate. So let's start with the 3 series that I started and completed in the time between these 2 videos. And that starts off with another Tchaikovsky series. This is the Dogs of War series, starting with Dogs of War and followed up by Bearhead. I really enjoyed both these books. These for me are peak pinnacle Adrian Tchaikovsky, and they're just a great little duology. I don't know if there's more planned in the series or not, but very, very highly rated in my opinion, these 2 books. They are a very different style of science fiction to his Children of Time, Children of Ruin series. They are much more personal, they're much more character focused, much less concept and idea focused, and I really like that. I like both styles, but in particular I really enjoyed the way that was presented in Dogs of War and in Bearhead as well. I also started and completed a couple of trilogies. The first of these being a fantasy trilogy, the Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. I really enjoyed this. I think it was done very, very well. I hadn't read any of the Drizzt books before this, and I think it was a very good introduction to the character of Drizzt and a really good introduction to the world around him. I really enjoyed these. They were solid 4-star reads generally, and definitely a good trilogy introduction into this world. As well as that, I read the Black Fleet trilogy by Joshua D.L. I loved this series. It was a really quick read for me. They're short books, they're very snappy, very punchy. I read all 3 of them in a week and I just massively enjoyed it. They weren't groundbreaking, they weren't going to leave me pondering them for weeks and months and years afterwards, but they were just really good pulpy sci-fi novels, and I loved them. I thought it was a really good series, definitely an enjoyable one for me. So now we're going to be moving on to the more embarrassing side of the list. This is the number of series that I've opened up in the last 6 months that I have not completed yet. And there are quite a few of these, and a lot of them I'm 1 book in, a lot of them I'm a bit further in, but there's plenty to be going on to be reading to finish these series. So firstly, following on what I was talking about with R.A. Salvatore and the Drizzt books, I then started the next chronological Drizzt trilogy, Icewind Dale trilogy. The first one of those is The Crystal Shard. And I really didn't love this book. It was not great. It was definitely a step down in quality from the Dark Elf trilogy. I've heard that the next 2 are much improved, and I am looking forward to getting to them, but the way I disliked this book, this first book of this trilogy, has put it a little bit on the back burner. I will read the other 2 at some point, but they're not high priority for me right now, unfortunately. Another series that I am currently 1 book into is The Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne by Brian Staveley. So the first book was The Emperor's Blades. I read this very recently. There is a review for it down below, and it is not the greatest introduction to a series in my opinion. I did not love it as much as I hoped I would. I found it quite difficult to get into, particularly at the start, but I do think it had a positive ending and definitely leaves me hopeful for where Staveley is going in the next 2. Similar to the Icewind Dale trilogy, this is one that I will get to, I will carry on with at some point, but currently how the first book set this up has left me slightly less enthused than I otherwise would be, so that series is going on the back burner as well a little bit here, as I will pick up other things that I'm enjoying much more and come back to this when I've had a bit of a break from it and I'm a bit more interested in it once again. So now there are a couple of series where I am 2 books into them. 2 of these are trilogies, 1 of these is a 5-book series. So some of them I've only got 1 book to go, and I should really kick on and read these, but it's just not happened yet. So the first of these I'm going to talk about is the 5-book series. This is the Mage Errant series by John Bierce. It is a 5-book self-published YA fantasy series in which we are following Hugh, who is an unloved, unremarkable, struggling mage at a magic school, and we follow him as he gains a group of friends and grows some notoriety and continues to build relationships with other people who are in a similar position to him in this school. The first book is called Into the Labyrinth, the second is The Jewel of the Endless Erg, and I really enjoyed both of these. I read these back to back and I do think they did a very good job at doing YA fantasy magic school setting. I think he did that very well. I got a little bit into book 3, But I think having read them back to back, I was a little bit burnt out on this series. I undoubtedly will come back to book 3 at some point, as I did enjoy the setting when I'm looking for something a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more formulaic, and when I've not been inundated with that formula through binging the first 2 books in a row beforehand. Highly recommend this series if it sounds like something you might be interested in. Next up is a trilogy that I am 2 books into. This is the Licanius trilogy by James Islington. I can't quite believe that I haven't got back to this yet. I really loved The Shadows of What Was Lost, book 1. I think that An Echo of Things to Come was a little bit slower paced. I think it got bogged down with flashback scenes, and it didn't put me off. I've just not got back to it yet. And I think that James Islington has written some really interesting conclusions, and I really do want to see what happens in The Light of All That Falls, book 3. And I can imagine me getting to it maybe in April, maybe in May. That's kind of the time frame I'm looking at, because I did really love the first book in the series, and I am actually really looking forward to book 3. I've just not quite got to it yet. The next series I'm reading that is technically open is the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. I am halfway through Last Argument of Kings, which is book 3 of this trilogy. I have read them back to back to back, and I have really loved the First Law trilogy. I think Abercrombie's writing is stellar and brilliant. By the time you probably see this video, I'm going to be at least 3/4 of the way through it, so it's not going to be open for long, but it is technically still open, and I'm really enjoying it. I hope that Last Argument of Kings continues the way that it started, because I think there's a great epic climax coming here from what I can see, and I am super pumped for it. Keep your eye out for more videos on the First Law trilogy coming on this channel. And then my final open series is another one that is going to be closed very soon. This is the 6-book Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher. I am 4 books into this. I read the first one, Furies of Calderon, back in September, October time. And then I have read book 2, 3 and 4 in the space of about a month and a half. I've really loved the way that this series has gone, how it has progressed. I think there is a great build up that Jim Butcher has done here. I like that we have little gaps between these books. There's maybe a year or 2 between most of these books. I think 2 years is the standard gap that you set between these books. And I really like the way that we have seen characters evolve and change over that time period. The changes between books never feels too large, but it feels reasonable for the way that they would progress. And yeah, I can totally see myself having finished this series by April, May. Hopefully I'm going to read book 5 in March, so by the end of this month. So hopefully April I will read the final one, and that will be this series done, and I will be all caught up on Jim Butcher. I will have read every full-length novel he's written, and I'm going to have read all the Dresden short stories as well, so I will be up with Jim Butcher, and I'm going to need him to start pumping out books. No, I'm joking. He writes at a pretty good pace normally, and I really am looking forward to more books from Jim in any of his series, whether that be the Dresden Files or whether that be the Cinder Spires. And there you go. There are all my open series. Some of the ones that I've closed out from last video where I did this check-in. As well, you can see a lot of the series I've opened up in the last 6 months, so I'm going to have to start closing some of those down as well before this list gets a little bit unmanageable. And let me know how many series you have open at the minute down below in the comments. Hopefully that's been interesting. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys again soon.